Now, the race wars are brewing in South African sport again. The Sports Ministry is demanding 50% black African representation for their 6 federations. In a country with a black population of just over 80%, that seems fair, but at the moment, South African rugby, South African cricket, South African athletics and netball are not meeting their quotas. Trade union Solidarity and its sister organisation AfriForum say that's ridiculous and have taken this issue to the Labour Court. They want all quotas scrapped and all selections to be made on a skills basis. Solidarity says the sports department is politicising sport. South African netball has agreed to a 5-to-2 ratio on the court at all times, but it's not sure what that quota will be made up of. The Sports Minister wants 6 cricket players of colour in the starting 11. The South African Rugby Union plans to call for a 50% participation by 2019. Now, the Transformation Charter allows the Sports Minister to cut funding to any team that doesn't meet the quota targets. Solidarity says this gives the Minister unlimited power. Tonight in studio with me is Solidarity Deputy CEO Werner Human and Editor of Race to Transformation, Ashwin Desai, is in our Durban studio. Thank you both for joining us. Werner, why take this to the courts?
Thank you, Jane. The reason why I take this court, it's necessary to mention we have a very specific focus. We are not setting aside the Transformation Charter per se or the agreements per se, but we say there are certain specific provisions which directly relate to quotas. Now, objection thereto, we believe quotas are against the Constitution, it is against the Employment Equity Act, it is against international sporting bodies, and there's strong jurisprudence on that. And apart from the legal side, we believe also there's a moral implication to quotas. If you say something like a quotas, you are guaranteeing a certain slot for certain players. And essentially what you're saying there is you need that quota there for those players to be there. Our position is everything in relation to quota should be removed and there should be a renewed emphasis on how we can really produce and develop talent in this country, because we do believe we have that.
Ashwin Desai, what is your response to that?
Well, you know, when I read and come across the debate about the race quotas and see the case between Solidarity and basically the ANC government, I want to immediately say plague on both their houses. On the one hand, I just think this is a disguise by Solidarity, which is replete with just defending privilege and doesn't see how race has operated in sport, as if our history hasn't existed. On the other hand, the ANC government is so culpable in destroying township sport, especially sport in township schools, that I wonder how dare they want to legislate on how many people should play in our national sporting teams, because they have done almost nothing to advance sport, especially in township schools. So, you know, one can see how these things play out in every day. Race is very crucial in the way we think about it. It's not only about skill. I still remember being involved when the Proteas was a fully white team. And it was only because of protest and agitation and confrontation that Herschel Gibbs and Mackay Ntini got to play for the Proteas against the West Indies.
All right, what do you say, Mr. Herman? Is this defending privilege?
No, not at all. I believe there's a few skewed points there that's been made by Mr. Desai. The one thing we do largely, or we do agree completely, is the fact that the developing side have been lacking completely. But to say that the previous government, the previous administrations had a focus on race doesn't mean this is the same way we must do it now. If we are serious to developing sport, we should have an honest look of what we want to achieve. If we want an output of an accurate and most precise reflection of the national racial demographic of South Africa, we say that is politicizing. That should not be the yardstick. And also what should be kept in mind is the pool of available players. That doesn't reflect the national racial demographic.
Don't you think reinstating it into the curriculum will make a massive difference? Because it's only really probably the privileged who can afford to pay for extra.
That is very true, that we've got 23,000 public schools. You've got very under-resourced communities. So what the trick must be, or not the trick, our focus should be, is to say there are serious disparages and serious shortages in schools and communities, and there must be a specific attention to try and create and produce talent, but they have. And we do have that talent. So there's no issue to say those resources must be allocated there for that. So that we have an environment that is truly free and that we can truly, as I said, produce more talent.
And I mean, a lot of people say that those who've gone through the system, Mr. Desai, feel that they've been undermined by the quota system, that they've already gone beyond that and that they shouldn't be judged on their colour. I mean, where do they sit in this big conversation?
I think absolutely at the level of national teams, we are advancing. I mean, we've come a long way from the so-called 1995 Rainbow Rugby team, in which we only had one player, Chester Williams. Things have advanced at that level. And that is why this idea, and I agree, that this idea of just coming from the top down and imposing the quotas and forcing this momentum onto sporting bodies, for me, is just politicking, simply because people must take responsibility for the leadership that they have. If you look at something like cricket, all the selection committee, the National Selection Committee, is black dominated. All the presidents of the provincial unions are black dominated. The CEO is black. They must take responsibility for ironing out racism. Because everybody says, if you look at Kagiso Rabada, Themba Bavuma, Hashim Amla, all deserve to be there. But they were arguing that there was a form of racism that prevented people from advancing into national teams. I think that battle has been fought and won. So there's something about that. So the focus should actually turn onto class rather than race. And I think that's quite an advance in our debate.
Could that work? And I'm just wondering what your end game is here, ultimately.
No issue there. If I was listening to Mr. Desai, it seems that he wasn't supporting or arguing in favour of quotas. He wanted a different approach. So if the approach is that we should have a class-based approach in how we do this, that would be fine. That's exactly what we are saying when you go to under-resourced communities and give them obviously more resources. You would have well-established public schools with coaching and facilities and all of that. So we would completely support that. And we want to add on, there's truly a moral implication, as we said.
But I mean,
Sure.
It's predominantly black in this country, so that is the issue, isn't it? I mean, that's the point.
The starting point should be not what's national demographic, but you must have a look at the pool of available players to netball. To, if I can make a quick example, if you have a badminton competition and you've only got 10 players and 9 of them are white, 1 are black, obviously because the pool of players are that sort of percentage represented, the teams will also more or less reflect that. So the pool of players must be enlarged, and that is the way you can do it through by, as I said, gaining more access to communities and schools.
Mr. Desai, Ashwin Desai, I mean, what sort of impact do you think this is having on our reputation as a sporting nation?
Well, first I just want to say there's a double speak that takes place both with the ANC government and Solidarity. Because to change sport in this country means to have a radical redistribution of resources. And this is where Solidarity and the ANC government are one. That's one thing they stand against. And so that's where this doublespeak happens. No, I don't think it affects our reputation. We're having a healthy debate 25 years into our democracy about what our national teams and our school sport should look like. And this debate that has been conducted like we're having tonight advances us, because we're pointing to, like we're doing about the transition, about poverty and inequality, we're pointing to whether the sporting bodies and the ANC government's approach to sport has resulted in the kinds of composition of our teams that we would like to see on our fields, from our schools to the top teams in our countries. And so I think it's advanced. Just like we can still unite on sporting issues. Just look at the Caster Semenya issue. I mean, we can, albeit unite around testosterone, but we can unite around sport and advance a certain cause on the international arena.
Okay,
so
well, let's leave it on that positive note, but clearly we are falling short here. Gentlemen, Werner Hemmen and Ashwin Desai, thank you very much. Now, the elections are just 2 months away. Political parties are now on the ground. Julius Malema and his Red Berets have taken their campaign to Ekurhuleni. They've embarked on a breakfast engagement with the elderly. Samkele Masego has this report.